Good evening. It's August 29th, 2014. My name is Matthew Ogden, and I would like to welcome all of you to our weekly webcast from LaRouchePack.com. I'm joined in the studio tonight by Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, as well as Megan Beats from the LaRouche Pack scientific team. Now, Lynn has asked me to begin by reading just the very beginning of a statement that was published on the website just a few hours ago, which is the lead item on the LaRouche Pack front page. And the statement is titled, "Celebrate Lyndon LaRouche's 92nd birthday on September 8th with Obama's impeachment." So the beginning of this reads as follows. "Wouldn't it be poetic justice for the U.S. House of Representatives to launch impeachment proceedings against President Obama on September 8th, the day they returned to Washington from the August recess? It happens that September 8th is Lyndon LaRouche's 92nd birthday. Representatives Walter Jones, Jim McGovern, and Barbara Lee, the three initiators of HCR 105, are demanding that Obama come to Congress for formal authorization under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and the War Powers Resolution." So I'll ask Lynn to deliver your response to this.
We have to understand the seriousness of our situation. This is not something which is bad for some of us. This is not something which is unpleasant. This is tragic. Tragic in the full meaning of the term, tragic. That unless we can solve the problem, which is the tragic problem, we will not come out of this alive. Because what is happening, as we know, especially in the western states of the United States, especially west of the Mississippi, the situation of the citizens of the United States is at this moment implicitly hopeless. There are marginal exceptions to that hopelessness. For example, some people in San Francisco are more fortunate than in Los Angeles, and more fortunate than those in Texas, more fortunate than other parts of the prairie states and so forth. But under the present conditions, their chances are worse than poor. Therefore, unless we in the United States are taking action which is action of change, which provides a means for getting us out from under the present situation of the people of the United States. The people of the western states of the United States are, for the most part, condemned to the worst kinds of outcome. This is reality. We have to change the course of history now. No more of the past. We have to begin to move. How? Well, let's take a look at how can we do something about all this evil that we're dealing with. What could we do about it? Well, we could do almost anything we wanted to. Now, we have a bunch of clowns in various parts of the United States, including the New Jersey region and so forth, who are actually members of our organization formally, and clowns. They do not do anything usefully. They have games they play, but the games are useless to the citizens of the United States. And therefore, we have to change our ways of behavior such that those who play like fools and think they can gamble with the future of mankind, who think they can get by with dirty tricks and schemes and slick arrangements, they can't. What has to happen is we have to get a revolutionary change in terms of the organization, of the application, of the idea of funds in order to create a U.S. economy. Right now, the U.S. economy situation is essentially hopeless unless we force a revolutionary change which does exactly what Jeff is implicitly stating in what he interjected as his contribution to this discussion today. So therefore, the point is, if you think that you've got some scheme, if you think that you've got a neighbor who's got an idea, if you think you've got a cousin who thinks he's a smartass, you're wrong. You're wrong. You should kick him, not admire him.
Well, let me proceed now to our institutional question, so-called, which we received today. This is directly addressed to you, Mr. LaRouche. It reads, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is launching a plan to provide a bank account for every household in India in a landmark initiative to help the poor. Under the banking scheme, account holders would receive a debit card and accident insurance coverage of up to 100,000 rupees, which is about $1,654. They would also get an overdraft facility of up to 5,000 rupees. Data provided by the World Bank shows that just 4% of Indians currently receive government payments through bank accounts. Mr. Modi's advisors say increased financial inclusion will help the government pay welfare benefits directly into bank accounts and cut corruption. India's central bank governor, Rajan, has said that the scheme will help the poor to gain what he calls economic independence by providing insurance and credit. Our question for you is, what additional steps do you recommend to Mr. Modi to help the poor in India gain economic independence?
Well, I'm all for helping the poor in India, but I don't like a certain modality about that language. Because what I know India. I've been there. I spent a lot of time in India and know what the history of India, what the experience is, know who the figures are, the leading figures of India. These are all back of my hand sort of understanding. So the question is, why are Indians poor? Because the British made them poor. The British Empire made them poor. And because the Saudis made them poor. And because so others made them poor. Now what we're talking about here is, how can we actually activate a process of creativity, productive creativity, which will change these things? This is not charity. I don't like the word charity. I hate the word charity because of its connotation. I want justice, not charity. I want justice. I want justice for these people, as people in India wanted justice for their own people. And therefore, the way we think is more important than what we say. And the important thing is that we realize that as in China, now China has become the model for us. Why? Well, because of Helga. Well, in part, yes. She helped do something important for China in a certain way, repeatedly. And therefore, we do have some credentials for supplying discoveries of reforms which can solve these problems. But we don't want to talk about charity. We don't want to talk about that kind of crap. What we want to do is say, mankind has a higher destiny than he's ever experienced before. We are seeing this in China. We're seeing it in the whole operation in China. We're seeing a quality of creativity in government, in economy, which has never existed before in the history of mankind. And we're seeing it in China. We're seeing other nations who are reflecting the same thing in China. We're seeing it in the BRICS and so forth. We're not seeing it in our own economy. We're not seeing anything good in our own economy. We should probably fire most of our people in our own economy. Fire most members of the Congress. The best thing we could probably do. It was the smartest thing we could probably do. So the point is here is we are trying, our purpose is to create a new and higher form of existence of mankind within the solar system. And our job is to find the ways of applying those technologies which are now being given to us, which are absolutely new. And those policies are the future of mankind. We are not beggars on the street trying to get an improvement in our living conditions. We are people who are determined that they shall enjoy an income, an achievement in terms of history which man before has never owned, has never known. Just like China, which now has a power which mankind has never known before. And our objective is in the BRICS, in India, in Africa, these areas all, we say, that bless them all. They are ours. They are our friends. They are our mission. Let's get all the crap out of the way, all the social crap out of the way. What we need is simply to create the productive powers of labor per capita, a person in the United States and elsewhere, just like the people who don't get fed in the United States. And we do something about it. But not as a relief program, but as a triumphant claim of a right, a natural right to creativity which mankind has never before enjoyed.
Well, you mentioned your wife, Helga, is or has been, for the majority of this week, in China, participating in a major conference at one of the leading universities there on the Silk Road, the new Silk Road. She gave a speech that was titled, "The Silk Road in the 21st Century as the Cornerstone to Order and Peace." And in addition to Helga, there were prominent speakers from the governments of China, of course, but also India and Russia, including Vladimir Yakunin, who's the head of Russian railways and a close ally of Vladimir Putin. Helga was also involved in numerous other activities which have not yet been made public, but we can be sure they're having a very profound impact. Now, in addition to this, Helga just wrote an article which is going to be the introduction to the upcoming EIR special report on the World Land Bridge program. And this article is available. It's called "The New Silk Road Leads to the Future of Mankind, the Coming Helium-3-Based Fusion Power Economy." And in this article, she makes the distinction between two mutually opposing systems on the planet. I just want to read a short excerpt from what she wrote. She said, "In reality, there are now two economic and financial systems built on completely different principles. One, the transatlantic system, as an imperial structure, seeks constantly to extend the boundaries of its sphere of power through supranational structures which threaten the sovereignty of other nations. It uses methods which produce an aura of domination for a while, but the moment this aura of power fades," she says, "then the capability of intimidation disappears. On the other hand, the newly arising system of the BRICS and countries associated with them, based on entirely different principles." And then she quotes Prime Minister Modi from India, who said, "The BRICS is a unique international institution. It unifies a group of nations not on the basis of their existing so-called prosperity, but rather on their future potentials." Modi said, "The idea of the BRICS itself is thus already aligned with the future. We have an opportunity to define the future, not only for our countries, but for the entire world." Now, Lynn, you've repeatedly said that these two opposing systems are the Promethean versus the Zeusian systems. And I know this was addressed on Wednesday by Jason Ross and others on the New Paradigm show, who referenced the famous Aeschylus play, Prometheus Bound, in which Prometheus is defiant in the face of Zeus and says, even though he's been chained to a mountain by Zeus for giving fire to mankind, he says to Zeus, "You don't control me. I'm not your slave, because I know that the future belongs to me, not to you." So what I think is very clearly addressed in what I just read from Helga is that at this moment, the BRICS countries are denying that aura of power that was bluffed, associated with the Zeusian system, the British Empire, and they're saying, we're no longer your slaves. And she says the capability of their intimidation has disappeared, has melted away. So we're seeing this, what I would call a Promethean defiance in the face of the British Empire, saying, screw you, you're no longer in charge. In fact, as Modi said, we know that the future belongs to us and not to you. So would you say that we are now entering the age which, as Percy Shelley says, is the age in which Prometheus is finally unbound?
We're on the edge of it. I feel myself on the edge of it. I insist on realizing the feeling of that edge on it. I know that everything depends upon acquiring that edge of it.
Yes. And
that is the solution. There is no other solution. There are no wet, shocks to be used. Mm-hmm. You either achieve that, you commit yourself to that, or you don't make it. That's the point. This is not an option. This is an obligation, which is fundamental, and you cannot escape.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask a very relevant follow-up question on that then. The image that I have when I think about the pathetic quality of the threats that are coming from Obama, from the British, from NATO, in the face of, for example, what they're trying to pull off in Ukraine against Putin, is this same quality of leaders from all of these countries, from Russia, from Argentina, from the BRICS, laughing in the face of the empire.
Because all of my enemies are moral degenerates. Period. And that's a fact. And if they don't stop being my enemies, they're going to be in hell. It's that simple.
I was thinking about the last line of the Goethe poem, Prometheus, where
hier sitzt ich vor einem Menschen gegen
und dein nicht zu achten,
absolutely,
wie ich.
I don't have a Promethean attitude exactly, but I do understand it, and I do think it's funny.
Well, this struck me today when I was looking at a speech that Putin made. There's threats, there's attempted intimidations coming from the NATO, from Obama, accusing him of everything in the book, even though it's been squarely refuted. It's all of these stunts and pathetic, dirty tricks, trying to bring down Defense Minister Shoigu's plane without giving him airspace over Poland, claiming that there's a big Russian invasion in southeast Ukraine when the OSCE says, no, in fact, there is none. And Putin is not being provoked. He's not being pulled in. He's not being trapped. And he said at an event today, I would hope that no one is thinking of unleashing a large-scale conflict with Russia. I want to remind you that Russia is one of the leading nuclear powers. It's best not to mess with us.
I think I would restate it, and I would say it more prophetically. If the Poles want to continue the game they're going to play, they're finished as a nation. The price of that criminality is a loss of the right to be a nation. And the Poles have been through that before. They should have learned the lesson earlier.
Well, that's another thing that Putin said in this speech. He said what he sees happening in eastern Ukraine right now, with the Ukrainian government forces surrounding these villages and cities, shelling residential neighborhoods, targeting infrastructure. He said, it reminds me of the events of the Second World War when the German fascist occupation surrounded our cities, referring to Leningrad.
This is the same thing. The British Empire, which is what the Poles are run by, that is, the Polish government is run by a bunch of skunks who belong to the British Empire. And if the Poles don't wise up and fire those creatures, they're in a destiny for hell for time to come, not for indefinite time. But Poland's chance of becoming a respected nation, if they don't change their ways now, is zero for a long time to come.
Which is the same situation with the Baltic countries north of Poland, who are voluntarily giving up their sovereignty.
They're acting like prostitutes and hoping that as prostitutes they can succeed. Well, they will succeed as prostitutes. They'll get the diseases they deserve.
Right. Well, I want to ask Megan to come to the podium to present a question which I think really gets right at this issue.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hi, Lynn. So I'd like to turn the discussion for a moment more specifically to the continent of Africa, where we see expressed on a single continent a very stark contrast and also fight between these two systems, between the system of Zeus and Empire and the system of Prometheus. Now, on one part of the continent, as I'm sure everybody knows, we have the really astounding and devastating outbreak of the worst outbreak of the deadly Ebola virus in human history, mainly in the nations of Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Republic of Guinea. Now, the official estimate as of now is that there are more than 1,500 dead out of 3,000 official cases of infection. Now, yesterday, the World Health Organization admitted that this could be anywhere from 2 to 4 times higher in reality, due to numbers of unreported cases and unreported deaths. And the situation of the fight to contain the Ebola outbreak was well expressed yesterday by an official from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, who said, quote, "It's even worse than I'd feared. Every day this outbreak goes on, it increases the risk for export to another country. The sooner the world comes together to help Liberia and the West Africans, the safer we will all be. The virus still has the upper hand." Now, there have been numerous calls, including from you, Lynn, from your wife Helga, and many others, for an international mobilization, not only to contain and destroy the virus and the disease, but to attack the conditions which are the effect of centuries of British and other colonialism, which have created dark age conditions in these nations, which have allowed this kind of outbreak to take hold. So that's on the one hand. Now, on the other, we see the nation of Egypt. Now, in Egypt, 1 year ago, roughly, Egypt was under the thumb of the Muslim Brotherhood and really British and Obama-installed leadership of Mohamed Morsi. Now, today, under the leadership of the new president, Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, Egypt is becoming one of the most active and bright examples of the Promethean tradition and the Promethean system. Now, this is centered on the Keystone Driver project, which was announced just at the beginning of this month, of the building of the new Suez Canal. And currently you have thousands of people, dozens of Egyptian companies on the ground. Over 17 million cubic meters of dirt have been moved just since the beginning of this month. But this project, which is not an isolated project, this is part of an entire national mobilization initiative within Egypt, along with expanded cooperation with the BRICS and other nations. This includes a commitment which was just announced to increase the self-sufficiency of wheat to 75% within the next 3 years. This project, this is not, this is clearly the centerpiece of what is an anti-imperial and an anti-Zeusian mobilization. Now, this is explicitly recalling the legacy of the former president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who in 1956 defied the British Empire by nationalizing the Suez Canal. He went on to build the Aswan Dam. And there was a very interesting article in yesterday's edition of Al-Ahram, which was discussing the current new Suez Canal project, and said of the president's decision that the funding for the canal will be Egyptian rather than from foreign shareholders and investors. This article said, which I think really embodies the point, the article said, the mechanism for funding will decide whether the project will revive the spirit of 1956, when the late leader Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal and took it back from the claws of global capitalism that had usurped it through conspiracy, fraud, and aggression, or whether the overall sentiment will be similar to when the canal was being dug by foreign funds that landed Egypt in the trap of foreign debt that concluded with criminal British colonial occupation of Egypt. Now, something which I think is indicative of this entire perspective and which really beautifully illustrates this Promethean commitment is that there was a call by the Egyptian armed forces that all unemployed Egyptian youth under the age of 45 should report and apply for a job to build the canal, which I think also resonates with China's recent announcement that they would graduate 2,000 new fusion scientists by the end of the decade. Exactly, and the call from India explicitly on this question. Now you contrast that commitment to the future, that commitment to young people, contrast that to what's being presented to those of us still living in these nations affected by the Zeusian system. Contrast that to those suffering in the countries being afflicted by Ebola, and contrast that to what people are suffering in the United States, where in many states youth unemployment is upwards of 30-40%. So the question I want to pose to you, given that, is really is the moral question. And that is, how, with this perspective, how does one resolve this sense of extreme injustice?
By killing the Romans. By killing the Romans. That's how you do it. And you pick the population you want to kill. You kill as many as you want to. You reduce the population, you make them stupid, you make them corrupt, and they love you. Because they like sex and they don't like anything else. What happened in the Roman Empire, the collapse of the Roman Empire, what happened, the whole history of the process. This kind of thing is not a natural phenomenon. It's an unnatural phenomenon, but it's dressed up to look like a natural phenomenon. And what you're seeing in Egypt, you're seeing it, and in other countries, you're seeing a revolt against the Roman Empire, and it's the Roman Empire that is Satan. Really Satan. And we know who Satan is in terms of his addresses in London.
We got a question from actually this is going to be a follow-up. This is a question that came in from email. It's a question that's on people's minds. Goes right to the heart of what you just addressed. It's on the moral crisis. And it reads as follows. It says, as the terrorist threats in the Middle East of ISIS and these organizations have become a major concern of the American people, especially with the executions and the recent beheading, the question is being asked, will ISIS come to the United States? Presently, there's an investigation into the identity of the young British jihadi as to whether he began his career as an enraged rapper who was involved in the beheading of James Foley, while Westerners are now being targeted and recruited via Facebook to become suicide bombers, being brainwashed into believing in reward after death. So the questioner says there is profound hypocrisy here. While this horror has caught people's attention in the Middle East, this Dionysian death culture is being embraced in the transatlantic. It says, here on American soil, this satanic hell is in full force. Western culture is turning our children into violent rage balls. Not only are these satanic figures held up as role models, they're even being hosted by the White House. And then it references a rally that was held in Worcester, Mass. To bring attention to a dozen heroin overdoses that just occurred in the last week in that area of the country. So this epidemic and death wish is sweeping the nation. So the question ends. America must confront its own moral depravity. With this historic opportunity for a worldwide paradigm shift and the recent cultural conference that Helga LaRouche addressed in China, this raging fight between Zeus and Prometheus couldn't be more defined. I would ask you to address this urgent situation.
Boner. That's it. That's it. Remove Boner. Boner is the actual acting agent who is promoting genocide inside the United States as a matter of fact. What the hell do you think he's doing with his policies? He's a murderer. Mm-hmm. And he calls himself something or other. He calls himself a man of dignity. He's a man of dig, 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 and find the grave. Get rid of this guy. He is a disease. He is not a candidate.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to the people who are saying, well, we need to come up with a reason to put Obama in front of the Congress and say, have you violated? Earlier today you said he's already violated the law. Just impeach him already.
Of course he is, because they're cowards. You're dealing with a bunch of people whose cowardice is so great. Mm-hmm. They will not fight to defend their own family, their own community. They will do nothing of any efficiency. What do you think is going on in the northern parts of the western states of the United States? What do you think is going on in the southern states of the United States?
Right.
What do you think is happening? This is all happening as a willful process, which was what Keisha had to fight against in her campaign. Mm-hmm. And guess who supported it? And guess how they supported it? The point is corruption, satanic corruption, is very deeply rooted in certain parts of our political system. And it's only when we recognize that that system is polluted, we then realize, what have we done? What have we done to ourselves? What have we done to our grandchildren? What have we done to our grandparents? What have we done to our people?
Yeah.
What have we given to them? What's about their education? What about their health care? What are they getting? They're being poisoned in the name of the law. And the time has come to change things suddenly and quickly. If we don't do it, either the United States itself is dead, or more of the world is dead. So what's happening in Russia, the brilliant things that are being done in South America, these things in India, what's happening in China, what's going to happen in other parts of the world, this is our future. And we will fight to the death to defend those values against these other values, which should have been garbaged a long time ago.
You know, one thing I just want to raise, you're referencing what's happening in South America. We talked about Egypt. With the new Panama Canal, which is being dug in Nicaragua, with the new Suez Canal, which is being built in Egypt, and now with the real discussion of the Kra Canal in Thailand, in 1983, 84, 30 years ago, you issued a report called the 40-Year Development Perspective for the Indian and Pacific Ocean Basins, which defined those 3 projects.
I always do that kind of stuff. It's my habit. That's my profession.
Yep.
So it's not a big deal. It's my profession. It's the people that don't follow my profession that are the problem.
There you go. Well, let me ask Megan to come up. We have a question that Michael Steagall sent in, and Megan's gonna read it.
I'm sure he'll make it brilliant.
Yes, so this is from Michael Steagall, who's a member of the LaRouche PAC Policy Committee. So he says, "These are not normal times. It has just been reported that our Earth has recently expanded in size. The cause of the increase, which measures nearly 1/2 inch in increased height, is actually due to the excessive drought now desiccating California and the western states. However, at this point, under this political and economic system, there is no solution to the drought. As you described in discussions recently, even fusion power alone is not a sufficient remedy for what has become a mythical-sized drought. So, it is also true for the upheaval now occurring around the world. The threat of chaos emanates from financial dissolution, plague, famine, and war, while a new world order of development emerges from the BRICS plus nations at an accelerating rate. New nations now join weekly, even daily, with a transformed sense of identity and role in the world. The role of the legend of Prometheus and his victory over the tragic character of Zeus could never ring more true. The United States plays a critical role in the global process before us. Your organization plays a critical role both globally and in the United States. As of now, the political leadership in the United States has not risen to the occasion, and this must change. Your perspective on this and what must be done is very much appreciated."
I would say one thing, that you did something once, partly under my provocation, which defined the way to think about man's role inside the solar system. Not as an object in the solar system, but a process, a lawful process in the solar system. And you developed that thing on the basis of classical musical composition, which unfortunately many people have failed to understand that connection. You did it perfectly. We had other people who were collaborating with you at us at that time. They had the same conclusion. We have the conclusion. The problem is we get frustrated by the people who refuse to accept this standard of perfection. Like the same thing that comes up here in discussing things. People say, well, you can use helium-3. Bullshit. You can't use helium-3. You don't know what helium-3 is. How can you use it? But you're a wise guy. You like to say you're a wise guy. You like to say you know what helium-3 is. I know what helium-3 is because I know what it isn't. You found out what helium-3 is without knowing what it is. And that's the point, is the ego of people, of their overinflated ego, to think that they know the truth. They haven't begun to learn the truth. You learned the truth at a certain level when you went through that little experience that we shot you through. It was clear to you, and it's been with you ever since. And it can go in another direction, in a better direction. It leads to something new. And the point is that creativity, the development of creativity, in the size of the mind of any person or any group of human beings, can lead to a discovery of an approach. What is really true about the solar system? What is really true about our system? And it is something you have to discover. And people try to come up with explanations. And there are no explanations. There are only discoveries.
Well, let me just ask a final question, which you said in your answer to the very first question, mankind has a higher destiny than we've ever experienced before. Yeah. And there's billions of people who are human, but mankind as a whole does not know what it means to be mankind. Huh. And so now we've reached a point, as you said, you can feel that we're on the cusp of unleashing the age of Prometheus. And I just want to give you a chance to address that.
Well, it's a simple kind of thing, actually, because we are capable of discovering what is the higher being which characterizes our possession of an occupation in the solar system and beyond. We are capable of achieving that. And we find ourselves not capable of doing much more than that, better than that. For example, the Chinese will tell you, who are really doing the experiments, they really don't know what they're doing, but they do know why they're doing it. And that's the difference. And therefore the point is, mankind is never perfected. Mankind is always struggling to become perfected. And it's the little achievements of perfection which lead to discoveries. I mean, obviously, the great Chinese discoverers who are working in this moon project and so forth, they have a great deal of knowledge, probably more than most people do of anything. And yet they have limitations. So the problem is not, you don't have a limitation. What you have is the fact is that you are capable of rising to something beyond anything you have been able to do before. And that's the Promethean principle. You are able to rise beyond anything that you have ever conceived of doing before. And if you haven't done that, you haven't lived yet.
Okay. With that said, I think we've done our job for tonight.
Okay.
So I want to thank you very much, and thank you, Megan. And I'm going to bring a conclusion to our broadcast here tonight. Stay tuned, and thanks for joining us.